Governments all over the world recognize that social protection is a crucial component in achieving national development in a way that it is inclusive for poor people and equitable growth. That said, tonight we're discussing adequacy and accessibility of social protection programs in our country in Uganda today. What are the challenges? What are the possibilities of people accessing it? Now, joining me to discuss tonight's topic, I'm joined by a panel of abled gentlemen from distinguished universities in this country. From my extreme right, a gentleman from Uganda Christian University by the names Mr. Tahinduka Aaron. Thank you for joining us and for coming on the show. And then right next to Mr. Tahinduka Aaron, we are joined by Mr. Wangusa Otahunga from Kyambogo University. So without much ado, I'll just give each of them a minute to introduce themselves, and we'll start tonight's conversation. I'll begin with you, Mr. Aaron Tahinduka.
Thank you so much, our moderator today. Like said rightly, my name is Aaron Tahinduka, and I'm a student of law in my 4th year at Uganda Christian University. Proud to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're very happy to have you here, and we're looking forward to having a wonderful and fruitful discussion with you with us. Mr. Wangusa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drake. Like said, Wangusa Hashim Abdulmajid Otahunga is my name, a student at Kyambogo University, teacher trainee, currently waiting for graduation. Humbled to be here and engage in this constructive and brilliant discussion.
Thank you. I'll just now stick with you, then I get to Aaron to all of you give us your introductory remark as we start tonight's conversation. As I started today's conversation, I earlier on said that governments all over the world recognize that social protection is a crucial component in national development. Yeah, in the fact that it is inclusive for poor people and equitable development. So for our viewers outside there who are possibly listening or getting to know the social protection policy or programs for the first time, give us a context to tonight's conversation with deep, in-depth analysis of what it entails, its importance, and maybe its brief background as well.
Social protection briefly would just refer to both public and private interventions to address risk and vulnerabilities that expose individuals to income, insecurity, and social deprivation that just leads to undignified lives. That is to say, where government comes in, and the government we are now talking about is where people are part of this government, not the one that is or is putting government structures at the extreme and at the bare end. But then when they come in and the likes of NSSF, that is National Social Security Fund, likes of the PSP, pensions scheme, likes of grants, and then these informal security organizations that are there. Take, for instance, these family and clan support programs, and the just neighborhood mutual understanding groups, the ones that always come in to provide that social capital and or that social atmosphere, especially when one loses somebody, and if it is in times of them trying to elevate their economic status, especially where they feel like they really need to come together. However, them being so pivotal in the economic status elevation, but then they have quite a number of challenges that they always face, especially these informal ones that are so much known to us. Regardless of these formal ones, the NSSF, the pension scheme, and the likes of very many that we are going to talk about as the discussion goes further, you realize that most of the challenges come in when people feel like, and like now in the modern society, where people migrate from the villages or from the indigenous communities, which also marks their departure from that collective effort or that communism, where they would be coming together to elevate their social status. But then that also simply signifies that at the end of the day, even when they are pro-poor people, but people have not yet taken them into account. For instance, of recent, we have had the National Medical Insurance Policy in Parliament, at Parliament. That is, of course, one of the ways of having and of enhancing the social security, social protection security. But then you realize our attitude really towards it is one that is depriving. We feel like, no, this is too manipulative, and we also feel like it is also expensive at the cost of maybe our status of the economy.
Yeah.
But that still puts us at a risk of whether we should be supportive of these social protection, security handouts therein and or not. Briefly, that is just a picture we could draw for us of how these social protection security organs we have and maybe a future that they face here and there. Disregard the financing bit of it, but most of them, the root causes come from our attitude with the immediate beneficiaries of these particular organs.
Thank you. Mr. Tahinduka Aaron, when you listen to the submission of my brother here, Otahunga, you get the view that he mentions he mentions the formal social protection interventions that we have. That is in the public service. There's the public service pension scheme. Then there is also the National Security Fund, that is NSSF. There is also the Parliamentary Pension Scheme, among others. But as well, I also know there are those ones that are informal. For example, feeding of children in vulnerable communities, among others. From where I have stopped, I wanted to give us an introduction from the legal framework that there is for these particular policies that we are talking about, but also your own understanding of tonight's conversation.
Thank you so much, Drake, Onen. I think people need to understand how this whole thing comes up. Because I think in modern times or in times we are in and in a developing country, this is one of the things that we need most. And I've tried to pay much attention to it, but people rarely actually discuss it.
Yeah.
So that puts us in position that people are not recognizing the importance of it. But the truth is that it is one of the most important, and I will simply explain that. To explain what social protection briefly is, it can be categorized in three, which can be later broken down. That is contributory and non-contributory. This is where us citizens contribute to our own protection in future, because some country actually call it social security. So it is us securing our tomorrow or our today using various means that I will basically describe. But contributory, it means it's us Ugandans or us citizens contributing to our next. And that is what entails what the things you are saying, like NSSF, pension, workers, what name it, parliament, the ones you said. But there are those which are non-contributory, where we do not contribute, and usually those are catered for by the state or the country, or the government. And those ones are broken down into two. There's social assistance, where the government comes in directly to assist people, and there's social care services. So these ones, social care services, just give it the literal meaning, they are coming to care for people, as we are going to go ahead and explain. But one thing I want us to understand is an element they call dignity, and this one I draw it from, because you talked about me approaching it from the legal perspective. We only draw it from the policy of 2015. I think this is the genesis of it all, social protection programs in Uganda. It started in 2015 using that very policy.
But don't you think it also emanates from the Constitution under Chapter 4?
100%, because various provisions on education. Social protection is a very wide thing.
Definitely.
But now we are looking at where government takes up the initiative to come up with programs which, and especially now these ones are the ones which are in line with this side of contributory, where it's people now contributing to it. But what I was trying to say is that the legal framework originates from then till today. And I will later want to argue that I feel it has been ages and the law is now old. It needs to be amended or changed. But getting to that, I was talking about dignity.
Yeah.
Dignity is something that a man needs, and here I mean mankind.
Yeah.
And short of it, it will draw us to positions where people are living in subhuman standards. And subhuman standards is anything that someone wouldn't wish for. And that is why these things come up, so that they eliminate anything that would drive any Ugandan to live in a substandard condition. And that is what is all over other countries. It is a widely recognized item. So it has come up through that very policy. We have seen them tackle it in different angles. Age, that is to consider elderly children. We have seen gender, where women have been considered priority to men. We have seen people with disabilities, where they have been considered. We have seen it being approached in the angle of health. We have seen it being approached in so many other things. And that is where the whole origin comes from, and these other programs come up as we are going to consequently discuss. But apparently, I think that could be the basic origin of it.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. You give us a very in-depth legal background, but also now highlight where we are going to, where the conversation is leading us to. You highlight the aspect of contributory and non-contributory. Of course, under the contributory, those are the formal social protection interventions, which is the National Security Fund, which is the public service pension scheme. There is also the parliamentary pension scheme. Those ones are contributory, that we contribute to our well-being when we possibly retire. Now, I want us to first start by discussing the formal before we get to the informal. Wangusa, let us discuss the adequacy, because our conversation is looking at adequacy, it's looking at accessibility, and it's looking at challenges. Let us discuss the adequacy of these contributory social protection programs that there is in this country, because we realize that even this year the president went ahead and said that we shall not take more people in the public service. Now that means we shall have Ugandans who won't be in position to secure their futures from the social protection programs. Now, discuss the aspect of adequacy that we're talking about tonight.
Okay, well, thank you. But I think word adequacy is one that is tricky in this particular conversation, simply because if you are to look at the denotative meaning, the dictionary meaning of the word adequacy is just satisfactory. And trust me, we don't have anything satisfactory in this world. That is to say, now if you looked at the functions that these social security protection organs and programs are supposed to be serving, one of them, which is to be protective, that is providing relief from deprivation, promotive, enhancing incomes and capabilities. Of course, also it has to be preventive, that is averting deprivation, but then lastly, transformative, where we build that social equity and inclusion and empowerment and rights are at the core of these programs. Then you realize that given those functions, they are never satisfactory enough, especially when you look at now how one of the principles, which is equity, cannot be there, and we have not yet met it. You realize that even when you have the Workers' Compensation Act, when you have the Retirement Benefit Scheme of 2011, cap 222, if I'm not mistaken, but then you realize at the end of the day, workers don't get the same. Literally, my take would be people that invest in much and people that are in those high-ranking positions that have always been receiving a lot, then their pension scheme is lessened, such that because we believe that whatsoever they always earn should have been put into circulation and, of course, also benefited them, such that by the end of their work schedule, they don't have to take their investments and also have to take on the retirement benefit scheme that is quite heavier than the other people who are just maybe, now I would look at it in form of maybe these soldiers. You realize that how much you earn as an MP and or maybe as a commissioner, now we are talking about authorities that we have, is way much or way too heavier than what a soldier is going to earn. So if the retirement benefit scheme of a commissioner is going to be more than 100 million, and then the retirement benefit scheme, maybe that cash transfer of this particular soldier is just still going to be at 300,000 or 500, then that is quite perturbing in my world.
So the adequacy is highly questioned.
Sure, it is highly questioned. But then you also know that one of the principles also of these social protection programs is non-discriminatory. But then you realize there's what we call affirmative action. Affirmative action simply means you're trying to help the marginalized in that particular status quo. Okay, so when you get to a status quo where it is men who are being marginalized, then you have to take affirmative action to elevate their status. When you get to a status quo, maybe to a group of people, to an environment where it is women that are being marginalized, you have to take them up. Now, where you find in this particular case, you have the elderly, we also have the children, and have very many marginalized groups, it also becomes too heavy or too burdensome for the government in this particular case, since we are dealing with the formal social protection security organs, simply because the burden is going to be too heavy. After all, the input is not that much from us. It is always just peanuts and or a little thing here and there. So realize that the adequacy would have been there if you had adequate financing, both from us, if it is contributory, like my brother Aaron has shared, and or from the government, if it is just non-contributory, where we just have these grants from anyone. That's the SEG. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Aaron, from the argument of Mr. Wangusa, his argument is on the question of adequacy. And I still want us to center the conversation on contributory social protection programs. That is, people who will get protection from schemes such as the National Security Fund, that is NSSF. People will get protection from the public service pension scheme. We are still discussing the issue of adequacy. If you get his analogy of, let's say, a member of parliament who earns approximately 28 million Ugandan shillings, who contributes to the parliamentary pension scheme, let's say they would chop possibly an enormous amount of money. But then there's a soldier who earns, let's say, 3 million Ugandan shillings, and they chop a particular amount. When these two public servants retire, definitely the individual baskets are not the same. And the aspect of adequacy is highly questioned. Discuss the issue of adequacy, because I think that is something that we need to discuss in tonight's topic.
Thank you so much, Drake. Like he has rightly said, the word adequate is a very big statement, and it takes you to a degree of satisfying someone. But rather, maybe we would have opted for sufficiency, which simply usually means enough. And still enough in this country, in that line, still arguing on the same topic, we wouldn't say enough, but discussing adequacy would mean that we would entirely criticize the entire system, which definitely I have no problem with. If you look at the ratio of men to women in the employment sector, you realize where they employ 49 women, they employ 65 men. Where a man is earning 250,000, a woman is just earning 100,000. So if we are talking about NSSF, and remember the primary goal is to look at these marginalized people, all whom we would call the vulnerable, then definitely that one prima facie takes out the whole ideology of helping the people that need that help, who are supposed to get the help. So in my opinion, adequacy is not there. Sufficiency still not there.
But Aaron, you realize the situation analysis is, when they're considering the risk and vulnerability, there is age, there is gender, and your aspect here is on gender. And you realize the policy that provides for the social protection encompasses that. So why would you then say that women are not considered?
They are considered, actually being considered, everyone is considered in so many things. But what I'm saying, where there are 49 women, there are 65 men. If it would be the other way around, because now we are favoring women, remember, that is the whole analogy, by the way, is that these schemes are here to help people who are what? In vulnerable positions. And those are women. And you know why women are considered that?
Why?
Very many different things. At home, they are given hard works and they are not allowed to go, usually. Now we are talking about maybe if we go informal. Some of them are succumbing to supremacy of men in their homes. Don't do this, don't do this. That is why they would want to be favored, not to succumb to those things of loss of their dignity or death, whichever, suffering in their homes. So that is why, in the first place, whoever came up with this whole thing of social protection was trying to favor them. But we are again coming this side and looking at, yes, however much they're in the employment sector, that is okay, but still they are not the ones who are done what, who are prioritized. So you'd find men, a man who is earning 25K, if they remove a certain amount which goes to NSSF, you realize at the end of the day they will get a better sum of it in the long run. So that is why I'm telling you that it wouldn't be adequate in that line.
So both of you seem to agree that adequacy is something that is subjective, and in our current context in Uganda, it's lacking.
100%.
And we cannot have something adequate to the social protection coffers that we have in this country. Perfect. We have now covered the aspect of the formal social protection that we have, that is NSSF, that is PPP, and now I want us to go informal. When we're going informal, we're going to look at community-based. We're going to look at vulnerable communities such as orphan children, school feeding, among others. I'm going to start with you, Aaron, then I come to my brother Wangusa. Still on the issue of adequacy, you realize that when we leave the aspect of contributory social protection, we come to those ones that are non-contributory. That means we're looking at vulnerable communities like orphans, children, among others, who do not contribute to their protection in years to come, but rather need support, need the aid to dignify their lives, as you put it, the dignity that they deserve as humans. But do you think, in your opinion, the informal social protection is adequate for those vulnerable communities that I've cited?
Adequate?
Discuss.
Adequate. I will still say adequate. Adequate is a big word to use now.
Yeah.
And by the way, to say that it is not to criticize the system, but you realize Uganda as a country, in I think the whole of Africa, if I'm not mistaken, but in the region, I would say it is the one that has the least funding of social protection programs.
Yeah.
And that is 0.7%. I think in Africa now the biggest is South Africa with 5%. So in that line of non-contributory, where the government just gives money to these people, we realize the biggest challenge we are facing is to do with finance. So the money that is allocated to this program or these programs is simply not enough. That is why of late I was seeing on TV and I was seeing the Chancellor of Makerere was advocating that in the event we get oil in the long run, we could apportion a certain amount of it to go to these programs, because they are nice programs. And I was seeing him cite some of the examples like Alaska, Norway, which have apportioned their oil to help such people. So even in that line of the informal, what you would call an informal sector, though it's even actually not informal, because informal goes back to the traditional ones. We connect to bury someone who has died, those things.
Yeah.
But even in that line where government is contributing to this, still we can't say it's adequate.
All right. My brother Wangusa, we understand when we are looking at risks and vulnerabilities, the government categorizes it in terms of age, gender, employment, disability, HIV, among others. But then if I were to look into those risks and vulnerabilities, those groups that I've categorized, when we are to analyze age, our country is 78% young people, that is people between the age of 15 to 35. But out of that 77%, out of that 78%, 77% of our population is in between the age of 15 and 25. That means we have very many young people in between that age. Now that is underage. Employment. You understand that majority of our young people are greatly unemployed. And remember, for you to possibly access these social protections, if let's say you're an able young person like yourselves here, you definitely need to contribute to your social well-being, your social welfare in years to come, but yet you're unemployed. Now, let us discuss that, because you understand the dynamics are quite complicated and the accessibility now becomes a challenge. Do you think it's a challenge, or it actually presents us with an opportunity?
It's two-way. You see, the iron, the assertion, if not mistaken, that the biggest population, 3/4 of Uganda's population are youth. The iron that is that increases the dependency syndrome. So we now have to over-depend on some other marginalized group, the elderly, who are also now out of the working space. We get out of that working vacuum. So it simply means since we are unemployed and then we are improving, we are increasing on this dependency syndrome, then it is two-way catastrophic. We are going to over-depend on the other people that are also receiving peanuts, as maybe the pension schemes, retirement benefit schemes, but then too, we are also not going to contribute to it, yet we are supposed to be contributing to it. You see, the informal sector we are talking about, I would just maybe want to say this one to my brother. It is different from non-contributory and then the informal social protection programs that we are talking about. The informal ones we are talking about is where you're just going to meet as a group, the bikoguzes, I don't know how to translate that into English. You just save and withdraw at a later time. Those village-based, sometimes there is family and clan support programs. Sometimes they're just neighborhood mutual understanding groups. You just have to come together. And most of those ones, in fact, are dominated by the people he so much likes, the women. You're always going to find women with those brilliant ideas of coming together. Each and every Sunday, they have to save at least a coin. By the end of the month, they have those politics of theirs. You just play your cards. Whoever takes the card, they give them that money they've been saving to go and develop themselves. Okay, which is the whole idea behind why we should be into support of social protection programs. But then now the challenge they face is that it is just insignificant informal security systems. Those systems are there, but then how insignificant they are is the policies are uncoordinated. Even when that informal group is going to come and trust you as their member with that amount of money, even if it is 500,000 at the end of the month, even if it is 300,000, they don't have now the obligation or maybe the security in circumstances where you fail to pay it back, because you also have to bring it back to benefit the other person. Having used it, now the policies where they are uncoordinated is in a situation where you now don't have that moral authority, that obligation. What happens in a situation where Wangusa now doesn't bring back the money to benefit Drake? Okay, it simply means now they lack that legal framework to at least be enacted and to at least enforce whatsoever they would be putting up. But then if you look at some other challenges, the administrative capacity, I don't want to only put it at inadequate financing. Financing has never been enough. But then we also have challenges like administrative capacity, where you realize that even when these people are going to be into these social protection programs, the capacity to administer all that ain't sufficient, but then also the retention strategy. You have a great idea, but then how best you can sustain that? So certain bit ain't there, even when you have these brilliant ideas. You know that I would even want to think that the acts of PDM, where they came into existence, perhaps the director was to support the social protection organs, the social protection programs.
It's actually PDM, I think, in my opinion, it's more like a social protection program, because we are looking at vulnerable communities like young people, like women, like the elderly. But proceed.
Yeah. To me, I would feel like it is indirectly one of the projects that are supporting the social protection programs, especially with the youth, since the youth don't have to return this money, they don't have to repay it.
They have to invest it.
They have to invest it, and the only role of the government is to come and follow up whether these people are now putting their money to its right use, and or maybe they just channel it around there. But when we come to administrative capacity, you realize that now the idea or the second principle of these social protection programs, which is transparency and accountability, now comes in. The stakeholders, when you get to stakeholder analysis, the people that are supposed to be the head of this small group, this micro group, and or maybe even the other bigger group that are supposed to be overseeing, lack accountability and transparency, where you just have a big hand, a big thumb to give them a heavy punch on their stomach. That's maybe about, even if it is as low as 50,000, they just keep their mouth mute, which simply means at the end of the day, when we don't have accountability, we don't have transparency into how best these programs are being supported, especially now the informers that are non-contributory, where we receive grants. Okay, you also, there's, in fact, before I forget, fast forward, when you get these schools where we are now having things like providing meals, those ones are also discriminatory, simply because you're going to find a school, so it doesn't level ground, it just says, if you can afford 20,000 extra on your school fees, we shall offer you lunch at school.
Definitely.
If you can, carry your own what?
Meals.
Your own meals. But then these are some kids who even come from from
From
home
homes that don't
without
have-
having breakfast, without having anything, so they
Right.
don't even have anything to carry with them.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of adequacy, be it in formal or informal social protection programs, is flawed.
It's flawed.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron, I'm going to just read this. Social protection refers to public and private interventions to address risks and vulnerabilities that expose individuals to income insecurity, social deprivation, leading to undignified lives. I want us to talk about a group that is very vulnerable, children. You realize that children are a group of people that must be cared for, protected under the Constitution, protected by the children's right, that they ought in everything that we do. Children must be, there's always that in the best, we should have children at the best of our interests. That's all. To realize he was discussing programs like the school feeding programs that we have. And realize that in Uganda here, we have a number of, when the current government came in power, they introduced UPE and USE. And that means they provided free education. And with that free education, they also had to go ahead and provide meals because some children leave homes without food. But then, as I said, you realize some schools charge students for an extra fee, which some parents actually do not have. Discussing accessibility, do we think really it's accessible to vulnerable groups like children? Do we have them at our best interest?
Thank you so much, Drake. I'm going to use two statements, and I believe, in my opinion, it is the core of this entire discussion. And that is policy, which is the legal perspective, and implementation. I beg you quote those two. I think we are doing it right on the legal perspective, that end. Because if you could quote some of the legal instruments or statutory instruments that we have adopted, leave alone the Constitution being the supreme under Article 250. But we have adopted quite a number of statutory instruments, and including what you're talking about, we have the Convention on Rights of Children, CRC. The Constitution provisions, Article 30, that provides for education for children, 34(2), that provides for children to be entitled to basic education, entitled to basic education. The truth is that the legal perspective, and coming from a legal perspective, that means that Parliament sat and said this is what should happen. So that shows you that they have these people in their best interest. So the legal bit of everything, in my opinion, is very okay. But the implementation is where we are doing it wrong. And implementation succumbs to very many bad things.
Yeah.
It be corruption, it be laziness, it be
commitment,
Work ethic.
work ethic, administrative capacity, things you was talking about, political will. So I feel the part of implementation that is in line with these very things, social protective programs, that is where we are losing it as the country.
Yeah.
So if the country, in their structure, seeing their structure that is in charge of implementing these whole programs, it is quite a big one. It's from the executive, Ministry of Gender, Prime Minister, very many people. If they could channel their focus and now take it to the direction of implementation, I feel they would do good as a country. But otherwise, if they keep focusing on enacting laws every single day, it would be still a big burden to the country unless they focus on implementation.
Okay.
So I feel in that line of the question you're asking on children, we are not doing exactly well. Reason being implementation.
Okay.
A quick one.
Yeah, sure.
Where do the street children fall? Because as of now, if you try to move around other cities and the capital city itself, we have quite an awash of street children there. Where do they fall under these social protection programs?
To answer you, Drake, you talked about 78% of the population being young people.
Yeah.
And actually, that 78% of that population, you realize that 53% of it are children. we only take up 21st, the youth who say we are above that age of 15. So street kids are still under those children, so they are definitely entitled to it. But how many of them have?
And that's a question we have to answer, because we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about adequacy.
That is why Drake will again say that the truth is that adequacy is not there.
And accessibility, we are still lacking. Poverty, that is an area that also we have to talk about. Remember, when we're talking about the risk and vulnerabilities, they categorize poverty. And from where I sit, for me to analyze poverty, I have to look at one, how many people are employed? Apart from employment, how many people are educated? Because from education is where you get into formal employment. And from the formal employment is then where you go ahead and possibly eradicate poverty. But those who even cannot go ahead and get into formal employment should go ahead and get into informal employment, that is engaged into entrepreneurship, among others. We cited out PDM. PDM as an example that we're looking at eradicating poverty, because that is the bottom line as to why they introduced PDM, to eradicate poverty and elevate families. But then Wangusa, speaking accessibility, let's now speak realistically. Are we anywhere close in terms of protecting our citizenry? Remember the president, when he was running for office in the year 2021, his slogan was securing our future. Is our future secured?
The future is scared. Well, the fact is these social protection programs are ones that immediately connect the politicians and the rich to the real people.
Yeah.
This is the best channel of how they can get back to the people and talk to them, simply because they're now getting the core of the people that put them in those powers, and of course the priority they would be considering. But then you realize that one of their objectives as these systems or these organs is just to increase access to social security. But then when you look at this accessibility, the idea he talks about, my brother here, Aaron, of implementation is one where we are heavily lacking. Now, when we get the access, we're even going to find that now when we get the non-contributory, where the government is sending, or the state is sending these grants, whether it is from the government itself and from other governments as foreign handouts, then the channel they are in implementation, because now they are the biggest actors, even when we also have some other actors. But then you realize that when it comes to accessibility, now the political commitment is one that lacks. The challenge that now we face when it comes to accessibility. Accessibility is, the channels are there, well streamlined, okay? But then to maneuver through those channels is now what is our biggest problem, okay? You know that when something is meant for the Karamajongs to benefit them and elevate their status, then the very people, the office of the Prime Minister in the structure he was talking about, is now the one that is going to be directly charged with
corruption.
Just corruption, embezzling them, channeling them, and diverting them, okay? The Minister of Finance, that of course is always in each and every structure for implementation purposes, also is now falling victim to such, okay? Which now again takes us to the question of accessibility. It is there, the channels are there, but then the implementers therein and all the stakeholders are the ones that are blocking the channel of accessing all these services. That also takes us back to something like either Gambanogu and who knows you that is bringing these kind of grants, okay? You know that even in PDM, not everybody is going to receive them.
Yeah.
When you're just behind closed doors, you're going to realize that these SDOs, the sub-county development officers, okay, in most cases, for them to append their signatures or their signatories on those forms that these groups have just come up with, they also need a few things here and there. And who knows you has brought you up this particular level such that we could ascend to your particular small organization, micro organization that is looking to benefiting from these programs that the state itself is trying to implement. So the accessibility channels are ones that are being blocked by the very own people. But then we forget that in this particular thing, the social protection thing, it is us, the individuals, who are supposed to play the biggest role on how best we could benefit. Because the moment you start barricading it, putting that barrier between you and the other friend of yours, then the whole idea of the social contract theory doesn't make sense.
Okay. Aaron, you realize when we're talking about this particular topic, we're looking at private or public risk interventions that we come up with to go ahead and have to sort out issues like income insecurity, to have respect or to have dignity of our livelihoods, among others. But then I want us to look at a group of persons with disability. You realize that these are people in our communities that either through government intervention or private intervention are oftentimes neglected. You realize when people are constructing arcades, oftentimes do not have ramps. You realize that most schools do not cater for deaf or blind students, but yet we have them in our midst. So do we consider all these individuals, or do we oftentimes just turn a blind eye and say, since most people look to be okay, yet disability, either you want it or you don't want it, you'll one day get the disability because age is also a disability. So do you think we consider all those factors, or we neglect them in our policies?
Thank you so much, Drake. You're talking about disability. If we go back to stats, around I think 26.3% of this country are people with disabilities. And of those 26, 19.8 are the ones with moderate, then the other percentage are the ones with severe.
Yeah.
Of late, as I saw the Ministry of Gender taking a close look to the same, because the truth is that we have been lacking on the same.
Yeah.
But there's something there. There's a study they are carrying out. It is called the blueprint something that in the next 20 years, they are closely looking at people with disabilities. So the truth is that in back times, I would definitely argue that we have not been doing well, considering that big percentage, because if you see even in our various institutions, you realize that they do not have capacity to accommodate certain students with disabilities because they do not have capacity to. And a student being a disabled one, definitely they may not even have the resource to facilitate themselves in that line. So it really puts them at a very unprivileged position. But that is why that disability blueprint study is being carried out, so that in the next 20 years, we have these people with disabilities at a certain standard, considering both their medical and social standard. So I'm positive that if that is implemented, then we would be good to go.
If that is implemented, well and good. We shall get back and discuss gender, persons living with HIV. We shall also discuss, we're still discussing the risk and vulnerabilities in relation to adequacy, accessibility, and challenges. As you've heard it, these are Aaron Tahinduka and Mr. Wangusa Otahunga have been my panelists for this first half of the show. Stay with us. We shall get back to, give you more insights on social protection programs in this country and policies. Thank you. Stay with us.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome welcome back from that short break. My name is Douglas Drekonen, and right with me in the studio, I'm joined by Tahinduka Aaron from Uganda Christian University and Wangusa Otahunga from Kyambogo University. We are discussing adequacy, accessibility, and challenges with social protection in Uganda. But right before we went into the break, Aaron was talking about disability, because we realized disability are a group, persons with disability are a group of people that we need to care for in the society. And under the social protection, we look at people who have those disabilities. And right from what Aaron ended, what I pick from his argument is we have the framework in place that goes ahead to protect these individuals. Let's say if you're constructing a storage building, you must have a ramp that caters for these individuals. If you're constructing an institution, let's say school, you must at least cater for persons with disabilities. But I'd like to engage with you, Wangusa. You're from Kyambogo University, and Kyambogo University is known for having facilities that cater for persons with disability. From what you see on ground, is it accessible for these persons? Is it adequate, or do you think more has to be done?
Well, adequate, 100% no, but accessible, average is there. Apart from the former structures, maybe the ones of 1970s, 1960s, 50s, the ones that were constructed way back before these social protection programs were put at the core of the nation. Yeah. Those are the ones that are not accessible. But then the newly constructed ones, they are all accessible, given the whole idea that we also have a full faculty of special needs with education, which we call UNICE, Uganda National Institute of Special Education. But regarding accessibility, it is there simply because even when you get any person with special abilities, their first priority is anyone who would want to stay in a hall of residence must be this person, and they must be catered for. Yeah. But then where it is challenging in the accessibility, when it gets to the idea of translating for this, especially maybe the deaf and or maybe people that need this support, yeah, those vehicles are always provided. But then you realize that when we get now the whole status quo of the university, most of us are not supportive enough, because they have on certain and several occasions met these very people with special abilities just struggling with that vehicle they are in themselves, even when we have a number of university students passing by as passers by. Yeah, so accessibility, the university has tried its best, though it's not that, it's just commendable, but then not that one would really feel comfortable when it comes to satisfactory bit of that we are, the whole idea that we are all debating. But it's really average, doing good and promising.
All right. Aaron, you are someone who fights for women's rights. Right before we began the show, you were strongly fighting and giving us strong arguments for support of ladies and women. And I want us to take this conversation to a group, gender. You understand gender, we're looking at male, female. And traditionally, our gender roles in Africa are quite different. We realize women are apportioned a particular role in all our families that at times in the modern day-to-day seem to be in a way that promotes inequality. For example, when it came to going to school back in the day, priority was given to the boy child, yes? When it came to doing housework, it was supposed to be the role of the female child or the mother. But then aside from the gender roles as well, I want us to look into the aspect of people who are susceptible to gender-based violence, which are still women. And you understand, when we're looking at social protection, we're looking at people having dignity, people living with dignity, looking at income security, because oftentimes back in the day, or even today, some men in their families do not allow women to go and work. Speak to the issue of gender, Aaron, with all the examples I've cited, from income insecurity to gender-based violence. Blow it away.
Thank you so much. I would want to address you to this, that in Uganda apparently or currently, less than 50% of the women own an asset. Already bad. Less than 50% of the women in the country own an asset. Of the 57 women in this country, I'm generalizing the gender, don't finish primary school, compared to, I think, around 47 of men. Bad. Earlier on, I had talked about 49% of women in the employment sector, 65 for men. I had talked about how much they earn, 100,000, where men earn 200. That is bad. And when I talk about employment and whichever, then I'm going back on what they contribute on their retirement. That is NSSF. We are on contributory. But we could even address ourselves to the one that is non-contributory, where the government just sends. Women are facing certain challenges in that line that they do not have access to these programs. And we are talking about accessibility now. The work burden women have in their homes now is too high. So they have that work burden related issues where men make them work at home and they will never have access to these programs. And those are the people in our villages. I will talk about on marital control. Men want to insert dominance and control these women, and that puts them in a position where they will not access these things.
But Aaron, on that point of male dominance, you realize we are in modern day and age where we have women who are assertive, women who fight for their rights, and we see them all over. And doesn't that just show you some sort of progress that was made?
100%. By the way, if now you would want me to argue feminism, which I don't think is a good idea. But that is why I first brought it in a very formal sector. And I showed you that where women, averagely in the country, where women earn 100,000, men 250, you realize in almost all organizations, and here we are being realistic, you find men are taking up big positions. Women are taking up assistants and what? Being average here, it's not that it is the case, because someone would argue that the prime minister of the country, the vice president, name it. But on average, where a woman earns 100,000, a man earns 250. So in the formalized, still we are not doing best. But I'm even taking you back to where we are going in our informal, in our villages. So decision making. Men are the ones that are making decisions in homes. So if a man comes today and says, of the 50,000, because usually the elderly, they are giving them 25,000 per month. A man will come and take up a decision and say, this is how we are using it. So it puts a woman in a position where they are not benefiting out of this program. Poor monitoring policies and corruption. Even when we are there, still we have seen the few programs that women are benefiting from, they are also becoming victims of corruption. So there's also poor room for participation of women in these programs. So in my opinion, the question of gender, the truth is that the country has done its best. Policies are the best, like I'd said in the start, to make sure they include them. But the implementation still puts women in a very unprivileged position.
Definitely. My brother, you want to add something?
Sure.
Please.
I would want to believe that the Employment Act number 6, that is of 2006, would cater for disparities in the income and everything, and all the payments, how much is being paid. But then just a personal one. This is my personal opinion, of whoever is watching this. I don't find a problem of women average earning 100,000 and then men 250,000. This is why, when we get back the expenses, okay, this woman earning 100,000 literally has no much expense to make, unlike this man earning 250,000 was got to go back and feed their woman, feed their kids, feed most of the people that benefit from them. So I wouldn't want to find a problem with that. But then too, when it talks about that decision making, I would want to feel that decision making, that is a process. In ideal families, I doubt if men dominate that. Simply because if it is in ideal families, then the whole idea is based on commitment. And trust me, like Aaron loves women, not women. We love his wife.
I think the best way for you to put it is Aaron is an advocate for the women's rights.
Sure. I wouldn't want to agree that he just take a decision and he can take a decision however dominant would want to be, chauvinistic would want to be, and then that decision won't be influenced by a woman. In an ideal family, women influence decisions. Simply because if a woman doesn't want something to happen, then it shan't happen. I always take them to be macro leaders when we come to the family setup. The macro leaders and men are just micro leaders simply because most of the decisions at home are taken by women, in fact. What you're going to eat, what you're going to wear, where these kids are going to go, what they're going to, most of the decisions, all of them, man only just appears in the night, goes back in the morning to continue breadwinning. But then realize most of the decisions are around that home setup, then it is them. And when we get the Domestic Violence Act of 2011, I would also want to believe that because that perhaps could also be addressing the whole idea of gender-based violence, where now societal constructs are coming into play to say this is masculine, this is feminine, this one must be in this particular position, as in we all now become societal projects. How to behave and how to react to different circumstances is how society wants us to look, or how society will perceive as the societal perception. But then I would want to feel like he also says, just adding this, that the Domestic Violence Act of 2011 has done some good job, even when we still have those chauvinistic, even when we still have those chauvinistic men or males trying to dominate whatsoever there is. But then on the legal policy framework, we are doing good on the implementation. And of course, now that puts us in a tricky position. Having something on paper and nothing in actions is totally wrong for us to be proud about.
A few weeks ago, I was in Kumi, in a village called Adodai, and when I was driving there with my mentor, I realized I asked the villagers that how far is the nearest health facility? Is it from your home to the place? And the person told me, Texas, it's 4 kilometers. And then I asked them, how about how many primary schools do you have? Like, we have one primary school, it's called Onyakelo. But my point here is health. You get health. You realize that averagely, in every district in this country, the nearest health facility would take you in villages, in rural areas, it's averagely 3 kilometers. And that is bad. Aside from the distance that people take to access health in this country, you find that our health is expensive and inefficient. Now, where does that leave us? It leaves us in a state that we have very many poor people who do not have the resources to access these health facilities, and yet we need to access health for us to continue living and contribute to the coffers of this country. So the question goes to both of you, but I'll begin with you, Wangusa, then Aaron will also go ahead and answer. On the aspect of health, has the government done enough? Because you realize accessibility is a problem. Taking you 3 kilometers to access a medical facility, that is unfair.
The government has tried, but then it has not done enough. This is why it hasn't done enough. You realize that even when we have all those health facilities, but now they have been taken into their political agenda. Whenever we are approaching these national elections, that's when we just elevate the status of a health center to health center 3 without any impact on its infrastructure, both physical infrastructure and the internal structure, whether the medicines are there, beds, and any other facility. But then even when we have them, we would of course commend them for at least having a health center in each and every sub-county. Now it takes us back to our setting as a country. You realize that you find that an entire sub-county, especially when you get up country, it is quite big, more than maybe 10 square kilometers, which simply means people are going to be sparsely populated, and they're also going to be far away from this nearest trading center, which we are just trying to call 4 kilometers or 3 kilometers averagely. So in cases of emergencies, that is maybe labor pains, pregnancy, or maybe an accident, or maybe any other thing, then accessing it still would become a challenge.
Yeah.
On top of us having a few well-constructed roads there in upcountry. Most of them, in fact, are just footpaths. To get to that main road that perhaps connects you from that particular district or sub-county to another sub-county will also be just quite a few footpaths from your crib.
Aaron, health.
On average, this country, you realize that now the private health centers or private hospitals are now dominating compared to the government ones. I think now it is on an average of 13 minutes to 87 minutes to access a public or a government health center compared to 13 minutes on private. And which that one definitely is not a good idea as per we are discussing this. But I want us to again bring it to our topic today, which is social protection. Social protection, like we had said, is if we bring it to the informal sector, and like I had said, emphasizing the word dignity of people not living in a subhuman state.
Yeah.
You realize we all have responsibilities in this line. And I must admit that to a greater extent, I'm impressed that you would find that around 92% of people in Kampala at least have that one person back in their villages whom they take care of. I don't know if that you really agree.
Yeah.
People in Kampala at least have that one person in the village whom they, even when it is at the worst, they will take alone and want to cater for these people. So I believe in that line of social responsibility. We are not doing bad. People in towns, almost now all big companies, all organizations, even in the public sector, you realize that they are now putting insurance for workers.
Yeah.
And these insurances usually even cater for children, wife, and name it. So I believe that in this line of the former one, it is doing exactly well, like it should be doing. But now it takes us back to the informal one. 87 minutes, you're having a person with an emergency.
That's 1
Person,
hour.
that's an hour
Less
and
than
a
one
half,
and a half.
almost 2. People are likely to die. So we are not doing exactly good. So it makes us resort to, and even these are not those bad doing districts of zombie and what. Those ones, it is even worse that you will not even access a private hospital or a private clinic. So it will make people who are resorting to this, exposing them to costs that they cannot afford. Even those are districts who are doing averagely well, meanwhile, that will access the private ones.
Yeah.
But others have an option, but rather the public hospitals or health centers, which is terribly hard. So I would say in the health sector, in line with the informal one, we are not doing any good.
Okay.
So,
Aaron, let me stick with you still. I want us to look at disasters. You realize that we are in an age that climate change is gravely affecting the whole world. And Uganda is definitely inclusive, that is facing or experiencing the devastating effects of climate change. And we know that one area that has experienced a number of disasters is Bududa. And Bududa is, if we're talking about climate change, everyone would jump to the example of Bududa because they've experienced a number of landslides. I think from way back when I was in my primary, around 2010, that was when they started experiencing devastating disasters. Let's now speak disasters. You talked about health, but then you realize we have communities that are very prone to disasters, find it very hard to access medical facilities, but also the government delays to respond. Aside from that, Karamoja. Recently, we all know what happened in Karamoja. Over 2,000 people died on grounds that they did not have what to eat.
Fine.
Yes? And how long did it take the government to respond? Some good days. And yet, Uganda is considered a food basket in East Africa. And we have people in our population dying. Speak to that issue, disasters.
Disasters, actually, when you talk about disasters, we are quick to think about those countries, those districts, like you said, Bududa, Karamoja. But disasters, it is equally big. And you see, of the homesteads in the country, 57% have been victims of the same. And those range from epidemics, floods, famine, collapsing of civil structures, quite a number. So you realize the victims are not only those ones, however much we would argue that those ones have faced it exactly rough. But we have a ministry running towards the same. And we have seen them take action several times. Not only that, by the way, we have seen even civil structures, civil societies, we have seen churches come in to help in the same. We have seen ordinary Ugandans come in to help. Still, if we are sticking to our topic today, I would say that still we are doing okay. We are trying our best. However much, I would still say that it cannot be anywhere close to adequate. But we have seen Ugandans take up initiatives. You saw what happened in COVID. People are giving in food to help those people. Recently, we have been seeing pastors, churches going to Karamoja. Kayanja has been there lately, trying to help and
We are being each other's keeper.
Yeah. So you realize that the element of civil structure, of social protection, the country is leaning more to understand private. It, but it is now so much the side of the informal one as opposed to the formal.
My brother Wangusa, disasters. I believe you're from Eastern Uganda, right?
Yeah.
Central.
I'm just
You're
mobile.
thinking.
I'm just mobile.
Please, submit.
Well, I wouldn't want to differ from what my brother Aaron has said. When we get back to social contract theory, even when we have those selfish interests, but we are doing our best to be each other's keeper. We are doing our best to at least elevate the status of any other person below us. Now, when we get the whole idea of the whole ministry of disaster preparedness that we have, and of course, maybe these other grants and or contributory forms that come through or non-contributory. The only change I find with that is on the principle of accountability and transparency. When he brings in the issue of COVID-19 donations from ordinary Ugandans, politicians, and any other grant or donation, we faced a big challenge when it came to transparency and accountability.
Definitely.
So that simply still puts us at a risk. How, even remember, you're now trying to help people that are facing these risks and are very vulnerable, the marginalized groups. But then you still have the guts, you still have the morale, the zeal to embezzle or to steal something or to just mischannel something that is meant for somebody below your status. When you look at the accountability they try to fake or they try to concoct around for the COVID-19 lockdown donations to help the marginalized, of course, all of us now by then were culprits, apart from a few PKs, brandy kids. You realize that most of us didn't get, most of the vulnerable, although we still, by the mercy of the Almighty, have breath and or are still breathing. But then too, that transparency is lacking. Even when you have an effort, we don't discredit the efforts of trying to help each other. But then on the issue of transparency, we need to be as transparent as the word transparent itself. So when it comes to disasters, we are trying our best. But then too, the question that always perturbs or boggles my mind is, if you have the whole ministry, and then we have faced quite a number of disasters, disregard the epidemic that was just maybe that caught us unaware. But the ones of Bududa, sometimes Kasese, the ones of the likes of Karamoja, why then only keep on offering these short-term handouts, okay? There's a landslide, so we shall just go either maybe try to construct some other camps where they can be camping for a meantime till everything is sorted. And as soon as that is done, we don't again get back the whole idea as a state, as a government, to make sure that disaster preparedness is funded, fully funded, that is help our brothers there. Because we believe that in the social contract theory and in this whole topic of social protection, security, every life matters. So if we believe that every life matters, then we have got to do something about it, not just keeping on offering short-term handouts. When there is a calamity, you come, offer a few kgs of beans and posho, then you go back. When there's another one, you again come. Even when we are in this era where we have those, are they weather forecasters that can even detect that there's going to be this, there's going to be that. It also puts us at the end of us as citizens. What have you got to do? If you've been alarmed, if you've been told that in the near future we are going to have landslides, what do we then opt for? Do we just say, okay, let's wait and see how the world shall consume us and all? Yeah. So we are really doing average good, but then when it gets to the whole idea of analyzing it, stakeholders, all of us have changes, both on us as individuals that are affected and on the people that are supposed to be at least elevating our status, that kind of direction.
All right. So tonight we have discussed quite a number of issues. Talked about contributory social protection, talked about non-contributory, then we broke them down. Then we looked into the risks and vulnerabilities, that is age, gender, poverty, health, disaster, HIV, among others. But now, right now, in all your submissions, you are highlighting a challenge to do with implementation, corruption. But I want us to briefly look into those challenges, and then we wrap it up with the solutions and call it off a conversation today. So Aaron, in your submission, you particularly highlighted that we have very good policies, but implementation is a very huge challenge. Are there possible challenges that we are experiencing in going ahead to implement these social protection programs or activities aside from implementation that you think exists?
Challenges are quite a number, really. And the biggest challenge, before I talk about implementation, I will say it is poor funding. Like I had earlier mentioned that Uganda, of its budget, it uses only 0.7 to invest in social protection programs. That is really small, if that is the first biggest challenge. Then the second challenge, and which I would as well suggest as a solution, is investment. You see, they are usually experts of investment. If we got certain finances, you see, like parish development model. If that money was used and invested in experts, or even money for NSSF, you collect money, you have to wait for it. That shows that the money is there, but it is just there. Wait for it till then. What if this money was given to investment experts and they use this money and it is accumulating as you wait for it? That would be quite a good one. I would look at small numbers benefiting from these programs. The percentage is really small. And someone would argue that it is because of the constraints in the budget, but yes, still we can do better. I would look at gender in consideration, like we had said. Still, women, when it has aligned to consider them, but still we are not yet at the best. So those are some of the challenges. Like I had said, work burdens among women, related issues. Still, I will talk about marital control, where even when they are in those families, especially the informal ones, men still want to insert dominance. And my colleague had said that the reason why women do not participate in decisions, he said that actually women now are the ones that make decisions. But that one I strongly disagree. Women don't take these decisions in the basic unit, which is the family. Still, we all know that it is men who are heading them. So then it would be the contrary. It would be women heading them. So a head is the person that takes up decisions. So they are the ones. Then you talked about them still being the ones that take up the biggest responsibilities. But my colleague, I would want to inform you that this is what women are fighting for, to get to a point where they are sharing those responsibilities in families. Their problem is that not that it's a man who does this. No, we are fighting to get there where a woman will be sharing responsibilities. You're paying tuition, you pay for the other one, I pay for this one, no, we pay half. So still we are facing that where men are denying women opportunities to get to a point to access these programs. Then I will talk about poor monitoring policies. And here I'm simply talking about corruption. Corruption is the greatest evil we have faced as a country. It is, you see, it is bad to the level, it has reached at a level. This is the immorality that people have normalized and now think it is okay. When you become corrupt, now they call you sharp. Now this is sharp. Ayaura, those things. The other day we were moving in a taxi and before we reached and I saw people picking up change to give a policeman. Corruption now, Oyayaura, the strict one is now the bad one. So you realize we have been eaten up by corruption. So even in the same programs, we are facing it. But to sum it up, really, we are facing quite a number of challenges. If we weren't facing them, we wouldn't be here. But still, good news is that I would equally send recommendations in the long run and suggest solutions. But apparently, those are the challenges I would.
Thank you. My brother, you were smirking when he was making a comment and rebutting on your argument. Maybe you can respond to that and give us solutions and you can wrap this up.
Okay. The whole idea about feminism, which is not a topical discussion for today, is a few feminists that have got the levels where they would want to be still shy from that responsibility. That would be disclaimer enough of him to say women don't want to share responsibility, or they want to share is just opportunities of how best they can benefit. But then to my personal disclaimer is I talked about an ideal family. My brother, we have very many families here in Uganda which are not ideal. Because an ideal family is where everything is into place. They married because they loved each other, very many things. But then you realize most of these people that are married, some of them just go there because the guy has money. Some of them are forced marriages. So at a time where you don't find this ideal family, the man is not doing their responsibility, the kids are not doing their responsibility, the woman is not doing their responsibility, all of them are divided, then we cannot call that an ideal family. And literally, decision-making process would be very, very hard for them. And in such circumstances, you do find maybe the man who is the presupposed head of the family taking decision at the end of the day. But then not only men are solely heads of the family. No, I have seen women who are heads of the family, even who go ahead and become heads of the clan, okay, heads of the entire family lineage. So it simply means there's no decision that is going to be taken without consulting from that particular person. Getting back to the question of challenges, solutions. Like I talked about the challenge of sustainability. We don't have, we have not put rotation strategies into place. We always look at short-term outcomes. If I have this and I can get this in the near future, that is okay. It simply means I'm not looking after myself. I'm not looking in the aftermath of what happens to my offsprings or the people that are coming after me. So if we would be in position to put up rotation strategies, take for instance that whatsoever, yes, I would appreciate maybe the retirement benefit scheme where everything is for the family. But then here comes a challenge. When you're following up, you have to first process the death certificate. It is very many things which in the long run might still render you vulnerable to not having, benefiting from the scheme under the pension scheme that perhaps your beloved one had contributed to. But then when you look at administrative capacity, I feel like there is a lot we need to do when it comes to administration, especially when it comes to transparency and accountability. Then the whole idea of political commitment that I also talked about as the biggest challenge, we really need to have that political will, both of us. Here, politics just to connote or to be symptomatic of policy making, okay? All of us are involved in most cases at a family level and at, of course, at a national level. When you have that political will, because you realize that we need collectivism. In this particular case, there's nothing like for mom of a high class. We are all prone to risks and we are all vulnerable. A big example was maybe during COVID. Another example that you just told us of age. Whereas you might feel like you're not vulnerable at that time, but then as you age, you realize that you're going now to become vulnerable. So when you take up that collective effort and understand that we must work together, then I feel like we shall have solved most of the challenges there in the social protection programs.
All right. Thank you very much. Maybe just in 30 seconds, Aaron, your parting shots and your parting shots as well.
By parting shots, before I get to parting shots, I would really love to give some recommendations to this government in line of
Summarize them. You don't
today's
have
discussions.
to
I will start with increased focus on gender analysis. Like I had said, the element of gender has been lacking, so I think it needs serious analysis. I would talk about review of this very policy of 2015. Realize these are 10 years. Drake, you know what 10 years means in the eyes of the law. And that policy has not been reviewed since then. So it puts it in a position where it does not match with modern times. So I think I would recommend it to be reviewed. Then I would talk about categorizing of these disabilities. People with disabilities, in that very policy, it generalizes them. But today I was telling you about the percentages of disabilities. 19.8 are the ones with moderate and 6.5 having severe. But the policy and the laws generalize them. But in good news still, the Ministry of Gender, that is what I said, it came up with this blueprint policy, and it is trying to categorize them so that in the next 20 years, they are good to go. So still, I would say that they could be quick on that one. Then another major one would be on translation of these policies. Most Ugandans, by the way, don't know. Even those who know think it a very big process. It is hard, it is tiresome, it cannot be done. So I feel if these Ugandans were sensitized and these policies are translated to them, then it would be easier for them. I think recommendations really are not very much different from parting shots. I think it is more or less the same, but it was a good one, and I feel it is a nice discussion today, and I would encourage the same. But as I part, all the parting shots I would give is, I would say that this is one of the areas that has not been given much focus. We argue climate change, we discuss very many other things, but this very thing which is so much important has not been given much attention to the level that even the part of the economy that is given to it or the budget is not exactly good, as I had discussed, that it is 0.7. So I feel it should be given more attention, and we look at it even deeper. But otherwise, thank you so much, our dear listeners.
Yes, thank you.
In fact, we need even to start documenting everything such that these discussions, recommendations can be taken to Parliament and or to any other body that is in charge of policy review and legislation at the end of the day, enacting them. Two, I would also recommend that whereas he recommends for policy review, in reviewing of these policies, most of them are uncoordinated. Rather, this policy, even when it is talking about the marginalized, it is uncoordinated with the other policy that is also trying to handle a particular group of marginalized people. So if they would be coordinated, then would be somehow, would be better than where we are right now. Otherwise, still from me, humbled to always be part of this civic space, and our viewers do not tire from always tuning in to watch and maybe make a few comments here and there. We love you till we meet again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't want to add much. It has been a very interesting and fruitful discussion. I've learned an ordeal from my panelists tonight, and I believe you've also done the same. Tonight we're discussing adequacy and accessibility of social protection in Uganda, and challenges as well that they're in. Otherwise, it's been me, Douglas Rekonen. I've been your moderator today, and I've been joined by Aaron Tahinduka from Uganda Christian University and Wangusa Otahunga from Kyambogo University. Otherwise, thank you to Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance, the technical crew, Rashid and Tim, thank you, and stay tuned, keep watching. Cheers.